Karen thought she had finally won. But when a mysterious stranger showed up at her doorstep, ready to expose the truth, a battle for a centuries-old address was about to begin. One that would change the course of history and shatter everything Karen thought she knew. The door slammed shut, muffling the sound of Karen's triumphant laughter. She had finally done it. After years of fighting, she had managed to convince the city council that her address was just a made-up location, not a historic landmark that needed preserving. "This house is mine now," she sneered, surveying the dusty old building with disdain. "No more dealing with preservationists and their ridiculous claims. I can demolish this eyesore and build something modern that will actually make me money." Just as she was about to pour herself a celebratory drink, a sharp knock echoed through the hallway. Scowling, Karen flung open the door, ready to send the unwelcome visitor packing. But the words died on her lips as she stared into the determined eyes of a young woman she had never seen before. "Can I help you?" Karen asked, trying to sound cordial despite her irritation. "I'm Sarah, the city historian," the woman replied, her voice steady and unwavering. "I'm here about your address." Karen felt a jolt of panic, but she quickly schooled her features into an expression of polite interest. "What about it?" "This house has been designated a city heritage landmark," Sarah said, her gaze never wavering. "You can't demolish it or make any major renovations without approval from the Preservation Committee." Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. I just got the city council to declare this place a non-historical address. It's mine to do with as I please." Sarah shook her head. "I'm afraid that decision has been overturned. New evidence has come to light, and the council has agreed to restore the landmark status." "What evidence?" Karen demanded, her voice rising. "This is outrageous. I spent months fighting those preservationists, and now you're telling me it was all for nothing." "The evidence is quite compelling," Sarah said calmly. "This house was built in the 1800s by a prominent local family. It's been passed down through the generations and has significant historical and architectural value." Karen's jaw tightened, and she gripped the doorframe until her knuckles turned white. "I don't care about your so-called evidence. This is my property now, and I'm going to do whatever I want with it." Sarah's expression hardened. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that. The landmark status is legally binding, and you'll face serious consequences if you try to demolish or alter the property without approval." The two women stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen could feel her carefully constructed plan crumbling around her, and she knew she had to act fast if she wanted to salvage her investment. "We'll see about that," she growled, slamming the door in Sarah's face. As Karen paced the floor of her newfound property, her mind raced with possibilities. She had come too far to let some meddling historian ruin everything. Somehow, she would find a way to keep what was rightfully hers, even if it meant playing dirty. Sarah stood on the crumbling doorstep, staring at the closed door in disbelief. She had expected resistance, but the sheer hostility in Karen's eyes had caught her off guard. Steeling her resolve, she turned and hurried down the overgrown path, already plotting her next move. As the city historian, Sarah had dedicated her life to preserving the unique character and heritage of the town. She had fought countless battles against developers like Karen, who saw only dollar signs where she saw irreplaceable history. But this time, the stakes felt higher than ever before. Rushing back to her office, Sarah quickly pulled up the archived records on the property. She pored over the documents, her brow furrowing as she pieced together the full story. The house had indeed been built in the 1800s by a wealthy family who had helped shape the town's early development. It had survived wars, economic booms and busts, and generations of residents, each leaving their mark. "This place has to be saved," Sarah murmured, her fingers tracing the faded blueprints. "It's part of our history, our identity. I can't let someone like Karen just sweep it all away." Determination steeling her spine, Sarah began compiling a comprehensive report, detailing the property's significance and the legal ramifications of its landmark status. She knew she would need to present an airtight case to the council if she had any hope of stopping Karen's demolition plans. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the old house in a warm, golden glow, Sarah made her way to the council chambers. The meeting was already underway, and she could see Karen's smug expression from across the room. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward, ready to wage war for the sake of the town's history. "Honorable members of the council," she began, her voice carrying through the cavernous hall. "I'm here to discuss the urgent matter of the Hastings House, a property that has been unjustly stripped of its landmark status." Karen shot to her feet, her face flushed with outrage. "This is an outrage. I've already gone through the proper channels to have this property declared non-historical. You can't just overturn that decision." Sarah held up a hand, silencing the other woman with a stern look. "I'm afraid the evidence we've uncovered suggests otherwise. This house is a vital part of our town's heritage, and demolishing it would be a devastating loss." As Sarah laid out her case, the council members listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to growing understanding. Karen's face grew paler with each passing minute, her earlier confidence fading fast. Finally, the mayor leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Based on the information presented, we have no choice but to reinstate the landmark status on the Hastings House. Ms. Karen, you will be required to submit any renovation plans to the Preservation Committee for approval." A collective gasp rippled through the room, and Karen's mouth fell open in shock. She whirled to face Sarah, her eyes narrowed to slits. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll find a way to get what's mine, even if I have to destroy you in the process." Sarah met her gaze unflinchingly, her voice calm and unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere, Karen. I'll do whatever it takes to protect this town's history, no matter who tries to stand in my way." The two women locked eyes, the air thick with tension. The battle lines had been drawn, and the fate of the Hastings House hung in the balance. The council chambers erupted in a cacophony of voices as the meeting adjourned. Karen stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor, Sarah hot on her heels. "This isn't over, you know," Karen hissed, whirling around to face the historian. "I won't let you take what's rightfully mine." Sarah stood her ground, her expression unwavering. "The Hastings House belongs to the town, Karen, not to you. I'll do whatever it takes to protect its legacy." Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "We'll see about that." With a final, venomous glare, she turned on her heel and stalked away, leaving Sarah to watch her retreating figure with a growing sense of unease. As the days passed, the tension between the two women only seemed to intensify. Karen launched a relentless campaign, bombarding the Preservation Committee with requests for even the most minor of renovations. Each time, Sarah would meticulously review the proposals, finding fault after fault, and the committee would inevitably reject them. Frustrated, Karen tried a different tactic. She began digging into Sarah's past, searching for any shred of dirt she could use against the historian. But try as she might, she couldn't find anything that would compromise Sarah's credibility or standing in the community. Just when Karen was about to give up, a mysterious envelope arrived at her doorstep. Inside, she found a series of faded photographs and a hastily scrawled note: "The truth will set you free." Intrigued, Karen pored over the images, her eyes widening as she recognized the Hastings House in the background of several of them. But it was the people in the photographs that caught her attention. A well-dressed family, smiling and posing in front of the stately building. "This could be the key to taking down that meddling historian," Karen murmured, a wicked grin spreading across her face. Tucking the envelope into her purse, she headed straight for the town archives, determined to uncover the secrets hidden within. Meanwhile, Sarah was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. She spent her days immersed in her work, cataloging the town's history and planning for the upcoming preservation gala. It was a labor of love, and she took great pride in her role as the town's guardian of the past. As she was poring over a stack of old documents, the phone on her desk began to ring. Answering it, she was surprised to hear the mayor's voice on the other end, his tone uncharacteristically urgent. "Sarah, you need to come down to the archives right away. There's been a break-in, and it looks like some important documents have been stolen." Sarah's heart sank. "I'll be right there," she said, already grabbing her coat and hurrying out the door. When she arrived at the archives, the scene was one of chaos. Papers were strewn everywhere, and the staff was visibly shaken. The mayor wasted no time in ushering her inside, his expression grave. "We've reviewed the security footage," he said, his brow furrowed, "and it appears that Karen was the one who broke in and took the documents." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. But why would she do that? She asked, her mind racing with possibilities. The mayor shook his head. "I'm not sure, but whatever she's up to, it can't be good. We need to figure out what those documents contained and how they might be used against us." As Sarah began to sift through the remaining files, a sense of dread settled in the pit of her stomach. She had a feeling that the battle for the Hastings house was about to take an even darker turn. Sarah spent the next several hours scouring the archives, searching for any clues about what Karen might have taken. The missing documents were clearly important, but without knowing their exact contents, she had no way to anticipate the historian's next move. As she pored over the remaining files, a small, unassuming envelope caught her eye. Carefully opening it, she found a series of faded photographs, the same ones that had been delivered to Karen's doorstep. Her brow furrowed as she studied the images, her mind racing to piece together the puzzle. The Hastings house was clearly the central focus, but it was the people in the photographs that truly intrigued her. "This family," she murmured, her fingers tracing the familiar faces. "They looked so happy, so proud of their home. I wonder what happened to them." Suddenly, a chilling thought struck her. What if the documents Karen had stolen were somehow connected to this family? What if they held the key to unlocking the secrets of the Hastings house's past? Filled with a newfound sense of purpose, Sarah hurried back to her office, determined to uncover the truth. As she delved deeper into the archives, piecing together the fragments of information, a startling realization began to take shape. The Hastings house had been built by a wealthy family, the Hamiltons, who had made their fortune in the local textile industry. They had been prominent members of the community, respected and admired by all. But as Sarah dug further, a darker narrative began to emerge. It seemed that the Hamiltons had been hiding a dark secret, a secret that had ultimately led to the family's downfall. According to the records, the patriarch, Henry Hamilton, had been involved in a scandal that had rocked the town to its core. He had embezzled funds from the family business, using the money to line his own pockets and fund a lavish lifestyle. When the truth had finally come to light, the Hamiltons had been shunned by their peers, their once respected name reduced to little more than a whisper. The family had lost everything, and the Hastings house had fallen into disrepair, eventually being passed down to distant relatives who had neither the means nor the inclination to maintain it. Sarah's heart raced as she connected the dots. This was the secret that Karen had stumbled upon, the information that had driven her to such desperate measures. If the truth about the Hamiltons' past were to be revealed, it could not only jeopardize the landmark status of the Hastings house, but also tarnish the reputation of the town itself. Steeling her resolve, Sarah knew that she had to find a way to stop Karen before the historian could use this information to her advantage. The fate of the Hastings house, and the town's very identity, hung in the balance. Karen pored over the stolen documents, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. The information she had uncovered was explosive, a scandal that had been buried for generations, threatening to upend the very foundations of the town. "This is it," she murmured, her fingers tracing the faded pages. "The key to taking down that meddling historian and getting what's rightfully mine." Tucking the documents safely into her briefcase, Karen set out for the town hall, her mind racing with the possibilities. She knew that Sarah would stop at nothing to protect the Hastings house, but with the damning evidence she now possessed, that historian's crusade would be all but impossible to sustain. As Karen approached the council chambers, she could feel the weight of the briefcase in her hand, a tangible reminder of the power she now wielded. Striding through the ornate doors, she made a beeline for the mayor's office, her expression one of calculated confidence. "Mr. Mayor," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I have some new information about the Hastings house that I think you'll find quite interesting." The mayor looked up, his brow furrowed with suspicion. "What are you talking about, Karen?" Karen pulled the documents from her briefcase and laid them out on the desk, her gaze never wavering. These papers contain the true history of the Hastings house and the Hamilton family who built it. And let me tell you, it's not a pretty story. The mayor's eyes widened as he scanned the pages, his face growing pale. This is impossible. How did you get your hands on these?" "That's not important," Karen replied, waving a dismissive hand. "What matters is that the preservation of this house is based on a lie. The Hamiltons were disgraced, their name tarnished beyond repair. Surely you can't in good conscience continue to protect their legacy." The mayor's brow furrowed as he considered her words, his fingers drumming nervously on the desktop. But the city historian has been adamant about the Hastings house's significance. How do I know this information is even accurate? Karen leaned forward, her eyes glinting with triumph. "Why don't we find out? I suggest you call Miss Sarah in here and let her explain herself. I have a feeling she's been keeping some very important secrets." Reluctantly, the mayor picked up the phone and summoned the historian. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, her expression one of confusion and concern. "What's going on?" she asked, her gaze shifting between the mayor and Karen. The mayor cleared his throat, his voice wavering slightly. "Sarah, I've been presented with some new information about the Hastings house. Information that seems to contradict the historical significance you've been advocating for." Sarah's eyes widened as Karen slid the stolen documents across the desk, a smug smile playing on her lips. "Care to explain yourself, Miss Historian?" Karen purred, her tone dripping with venom. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned the pages, her mind reeling with the implications. The truth about the Hamiltons was there, plain as day, the scandal, the downfall, the tarnished legacy. And she had been kept in the dark, her crusade to protect the Hastings house unwittingly built on a foundation of lies. Swallowing hard, Sarah looked up, her expression a mix of shock and betrayal. I had no idea. How could this have happened?" The mayor's expression hardened. "It would seem that you've been less than forthcoming, Miss Sarah. And if what's in these documents is true, then the landmark status of the Hastings house is clearly in question." Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Karen's triumph was palpable, and for the first time, the historian felt utterly powerless to stop her. As the mayor continued to grill her, Sarah's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to salvage the situation. But with the damning evidence laid bare, she knew that her credibility, and the fate of the Hastings house, hung in the balance. Sarah's head was spinning as she stood in the mayor's office, the stolen documents burning a hole in her hands. The revelations about the Hamiltons' dark past had shaken her to the core, forcing her to confront the possibility that everything she had fought for was built on a foundation of lies. I had no idea about any of this," she stammered, her voice weak and unconvincing even to her own ears. Karen's lips curled into a triumphant sneer. "Oh, I find that hard to believe, Sarah. You're the town historian, after all. Surely you must have uncovered these records in your research." The mayor's brow furrowed as he fixed Sarah with a stern gaze. "That's exactly what I'd like to know, Miss Sarah. If this information is true, then how is it that you were unaware of the Hamiltons' scandalous past?" Sarah swallowed hard, her mind racing to find the right words. I can assure you that I had no knowledge of this." The records in the archives simply didn't contain this level of detail. I've dedicated my life to preserving the town's history, and I would never knowingly suppress information like this. Karen snorted derisively. Oh, come now, Sarah. Do you really expect us to believe that? You're the gatekeeper of this town's history. How could you have missed something this significant? The mayor held up a hand, silencing Karen's tirade. Be that as it may, the fact remains that we now have evidence that directly contradicts the historical significance you've been touting for the Hastings house. I'm afraid I have no choice but to reconsider the landmark status. Sarah felt her heart sink, the weight of the situation pressing down on her like a physical force. But you can't do that, she pleaded, her desperation seeping into her voice. The Hastings house is a vital part of our town's heritage. Just because of some old scandal, you can't simply erase its legacy. Karen's eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. Oh, but we can, Sarah. And we will. This house is mine, fair and square. And with the mayor's support, there's nothing you can do to stop me. Sarah felt a surge of panic as she realized the devastating implications of what was happening. If the Hastings house lost its landmark status, Karen would be free to demolish it, erasing centuries of history and community identity. And with the damning evidence against her, Sarah knew she would have little credibility to fight back. Grasping at straws, she turned to the mayor, her eyes pleading. Please, Mr. Mayor, you have to reconsider. I know this information is troubling, but the Hastings house is so much more than just the Hamiltons' legacy. It's a symbol of our town's resilience, our ability to overcome even the darkest of pasts. The mayor's expression softened slightly, and Sarah felt a flicker of hope. I understand your passion, Sarah, but the facts are clear. Unless you can provide some compelling evidence to the contrary, I'm afraid I have no choice but to side with Ms. Karen. Sarah's shoulders slumped in defeat, the weight of her failure crushing her. As Karen shot her a triumphant grin and strode out of the office, Sarah knew that she had to find a way to turn the tide, no matter the cost. The fate of the Hastings house, and her own reputation, hung in the balance, and she refused to go down without a fight. As Sarah left the mayor's office, her mind was whirling with 1,000 thoughts. The revelation of the Hamiltons' dark past had shaken her to the core, forcing her to confront the possibility that everything she had fought for was built on a foundation of lies. But even as the weight of her failure threatened to crush her, a glimmer of hope began to flicker in the back of her mind. There had to be more to the story, some crucial piece of information that had been lost or overlooked over the years. Hurrying back to the archives, Sarah began to scour the records with renewed determination. She pored over the documents, searching for any clue, any shred of evidence that could help her turn the tide. As the hours stretched on, her frustration mounted. The information Karen had uncovered seemed to be airtight. The scandal that had plagued the Hamiltons well documented and seemingly incontrovertible. Just as Sarah was about to give up, a small, unassuming file tucked away in the corner of the archives caught her eye. Pulling it out, she felt a surge of hope as she recognized the familiar name, Hastings. Carefully opening the file, Sarah began to read, her eyes widening with each passing moment. The documents contained a series of letters written by a distant relative of the Hamiltons who had inherited the Hastings house after the family's downfall. In the letters, the relative described their efforts to restore the dilapidated property and preserve the legacy of the Hamiltons, despite the town's lingering disdain for the family name. They had fought tirelessly to have the house designated as a historic landmark, determined to right the wrongs of the past and ensure that the Hamiltons' story was not forgotten. As Sarah continued to read, she began to understand the true significance of the Hastings house. It wasn't just a symbol of the town's history, it was a testament to the power of redemption, a reminder that even the darkest of pasts could be overcome. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah hurried to the mayor's office, the precious file clutched in her hands. She burst through the door, her eyes alight with determination. "Mr. Mayor, I have something that I need you to see," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. The mayor looked up, his brow furrowed. "What is it, Sarah?" "I thought we had already settled the matter of the Hastings house." Sarah shook her head, her expression resolute. "No, sir, we haven't. I've uncovered new information that changes everything." As she laid out the contents of the file, the mayor's eyes widened in surprise. He listened intently, his expression shifting from skepticism to growing understanding. This changes everything," he murmured, his fingers tracing the faded pages. "It seems the Hastings house has a legacy of its own, one that transcends the misdeeds of the Hamiltons." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Exactly. This house is more than just a relic of the past. It's a symbol of resilience, of the power of redemption. We can't let Karen tear that down, not without a fight." The mayor's gaze hardened with determination. "You're right. I'll call an emergency meeting of the Preservation Committee immediately. We need to act quickly if we're going to save this house." As Sarah hurried out of the office, a glimmer of hope began to take root in her heart. The battle for the Hastings house was far from over, but she knew that she had the power to turn the tide. With the truth on her side, she was more determined than ever to protect the town's cherished history. The air in the council chambers was thick with tension as Sarah presented her new evidence to the Preservation Committee. Karen sat across the room, her arms crossed and her expression sour, clearly unhappy with the turn of events. "As you can see from these letters," Sarah said, her voice steady and confident, "the Hastings house has a legacy that extends far beyond the Hamilton family's scandal. It was a distant relative who fought to have the property designated as a historic landmark, determined to preserve the memory of the house and redeem the family name." The committee members murmured amongst themselves, their brows furrowed as they pored over the documents. Finally, the mayor spoke up, his expression grave. "If what you're saying is true, Sarah, then the Hastings house is more than just a relic of the past. It's a symbol of resilience and redemption, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of times." He paused, his gaze shifting to Karen, who had gone deathly pale. "I'm afraid I have no choice but to reinstate the landmark status and deny your request for demolition, Ms. Karen." Karen shot to her feet, her face flushed with rage. "This is an outrage," she cried, her voice shrill. "I spent months fighting to have this property declared non-historical, and now you're just going to ignore the truth I uncovered." Sarah fixed her with a cool, unwavering stare. "The truth, Karen, is that the Hastings house is a vital part of our town's history. A history that deserves to be preserved and celebrated, not buried under the weight of your personal ambitions." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but the mayor silenced her with a raised hand. "The decision has been made, Ms. Karen. The Hastings house will remain a protected landmark, and any attempts to alter or demolish it will be met with serious consequences." Fuming, Karen turned and stormed out of the chamber, her heels clicking angrily against the marble floor. Sarah watched her go, a small smile playing on her lips. As the meeting adjourned, the committee members approached Sarah, their expressions a mix of gratitude and admiration. "You've done an incredible thing here, Sarah," the mayor said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've not only saved a piece of our town's history, but you've also proven the power of truth and perseverance." Sarah felt a surge of pride, but beneath the surface, she knew that the battle had been far from easy. The revelation of the Hamiltons' past had shaken her, forcing her to confront the possibility that she had been wrong all along. But in the end, the truth had prevailed. The Hastings house would stand as a testament to the town's resilience, a reminder that even the darkest of pasts could be overcome. As Sarah walked back to her office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of renewed purpose. This wasn't just a victory for the Hastings house. It was a victory for the town itself, a reminder that the preservation of history was more than just a passion, but a sacred duty. And as she looked out over the centuries-old building, she knew that she would continue to fight, no matter the cost, to ensure that the town's identity remained intact even in the face of those who would seek to erase it.